Very good. And welcome to Elise Feldman, who now is in Florida. And I thought she was still in Jersey. So, welcome, Elise. It's wonderful to have you. And thank you for volunteering for this latest episode of My Jewish Story.
Oh my gosh.
The purpose of this program is to reach out to different congregants of Beth Miriam and to show others in the temple and elsewhere, I suppose, the diversity of people we have in the temple. And I know that your story is really interesting and that you are the poster woman for Jewish involvement in American Jewry. So I'm just going to ask a very, very open-ended question, and wherever the discussion takes us is where it takes us. Tell us your Jewish story.
Oh, for goodness sakes. Well, the Jewish story starts when I was a little girl. My mother has recounted this to me. And I went to school. I grew up in Middlesex, which is definitely not a very Jewish area. It still doesn't have a synagogue there to this day. And we belong to the synagogue next door in Boundbrook, which my parents helped start. And in those days, it was conservadox, an Orthodox rabbi with a conservative congregation. But anyway, I came home from school one day, and I loved hearing all about Christmas. And I said to my mother, "So when will I be un-Jewish?
When will you be un-Jewish?"
So she said, "No, it doesn't work like that." I said, "But the kids all get these wonderful gifts for Christmas. She says, we have Hanukkah, and you get a gift every day." So the gifts every day were, one day I got little packs. In those days, they made tissues in colors, and you would get layers of, I'm dating myself, yellow and green.
I remember them.
Or a little barrette. To me, it didn't really compare with what my friends were getting for Christmas, but it obviously didn't deter me. And I went through Hebrew school 2 afternoons a week. You get picked up from school, and then you get driven immediately to Hebrew school, so you never got to see the light of day. You left for school in the dark, and you came home in the dark. And I was bat mitzvah. Now, in those days, remember, we had an Orthodox rabbi. So all the girls were bat mitzvahed at the same time in a class. In a class. So every boy got his own bar mitzvah, but we only got one a year, and it was on a Sunday. It was never on Shabbat. Women were not allowed on the bima. So I was bat mitzvahed, and I think everybody was snickering in the background. I had a very long parsha in December, and I think I mispronounced more than I pronounced correctly. But that didn't deter me. The rabbi loved me. I used to babysit for their son. And so that time passed. My parents didn't have, I guess, the means when I was a kid, but by the time my sister got older, she got to go to Tel Yehuda for the Young Judea camp. But in college, I needed a part-time job. And I ended up leading Jewish youth groups for the local synagogue there.
And where was this? Where was
it? Was in Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. And I stayed there. I got married there the first time, and was hired by Hadassah to run their Young Judea. It was called Hashachar at the time, and that was my job. And I had about 3,000 kids from Western Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. So we had 23 youth leaders. So I dealt with all of that at the time of the 6-Day War. And the parents were about ready to ship me over to Israel because they were concerned about their children who were there on year course, which I didn't have to go. The kids were able to come home. So that was that, the Jewish life and the Jewish organization life never left me from day one. And the gal who was leading the Israeli dance troupe left. And next thing you know, I was director of Roshona. And so, I'm a dancer. I have a dance background.
Yeah, I do.
And after college, well, later on, I ended up joining Martha Graham. She asked me to come into her program, but at that time I was leading Roshona, and we performed in the Three River Stadium. So Pittsburgh has three rivers that come together it's into the Ohio, the Monongahela and the Allegheny. And right in the center is the most gorgeous stadium. So every year I would put on a performance, and then I would roam around so that I would take lessons from the other troops. So one year I learned buck dancing, one year I learned Nigerian. It was a lot of fun.
How much Permati Brothers did you eat?
Huh?
How much Permati Brothers food did you eat?
We lived in Squirrel Hill, which was the Jewish section.
I think it still is.
Yeah, but you don't, in those days, there were 3 Jewish bakeries and 5 butchers and a couple of Jewish delis. And my grandmother would say, when you come home, please bring me the fliegele. So if the audience doesn't know what that is, it's the feet of the chicken, which you can't get anymore. Would put it in ice and fly home.
Right.
But
my sister used to eat chicken feet sandwiches.
Chicken feet sandwiches. Oh,
yeah,
that was
and the chicken's legs would be sticking out of the bread, and I was like,
no. My grandmother put it in soup, and you just kind of
sure.
Yeah, it was very succulent. And so that's that was the genesis of that. When I started my own home, I decided I would keep kosher. And my father came from a religious household, and when he got married, they chose not to keep kosher, but he said that was a mistake. And if you can, just do it from the beginning, because you'll never not be able to afford it, and you'll never not know how to do it. So it turns out that I do, my sister does, another cousin did, and we've just kept that going since that time. And that was the early genesis. But then I came back and I went to work in New York, and so there was no more Young Judea. There wasn't that kind of element, but yet I still maintained Kosher Kitchen. And fast forwarding to later years, now I'm now on my own. I'm in my own business, and I had met the love of my life, Alan Schnur, and I had a lot of knives buried in flower pots because he didn't know from kosher.
Oh, I see.
So he would use a utensil and say, "No, that's the wrong one. Go stick it in the dirt." There were many pots of dirt with silverware sticking out.
That's funny.
Yeah, and then when we decided to have a home here in Florida, I said to him, "Okay, well, we keep kosher like we do in New Jersey." And he said, "I don't want to." I said, "Why don't you want to?" He said, "Well, it's expensive." I said, "What's expensive?" He said, "The meat." I said, "How often do we eat meat? You won't eat chicken. You won't even let me get it from the kosher department at ShopRite. It has to be from the butcher. You don't like it otherwise. You never eat milk and meat. You never eat pork. What's the problem?" He threw up. Alan, he threw up.
Of course.
Okay. So that's that story. But I became very involved with Jewish Federation, and I felt that as a single person, it was very difficult to be part of a synagogue community. But I had Jewish Federation, and to me it was very important to of course support the Jews all around the world and make sure that Israel would survive, but also because of the local agencies and the local commitment. And I did it because I felt I could, and many other people couldn't. And so this was a very important element to both of us. I'm still on the board. I don't. They recycle us. Jewish Federation.
They recycle us. You were the president for a while.
I was the president when it was just Monmouth, and then we merged with Middlesex, which we call Jewish Federation in the heart of New Jersey. And I'm a vice president of governance. So it's a very interesting spot to be in to make sure that we maintain certain procedures and ethics. Are still a business. Now, I had finished a stint on the national board. When I was working in downtown Springfield, a fellow I knew introduced me to the Jewish Federation there. So it preceded involvement in Middlesex Monmouth was preceded by being involved in Scotch Plains in Central Jersey before they merged with Metro West. And he introduced me to Bert Lazaro. I don't know if that name rings a bell to you.
I'm not sure.
He was the exec in Central Jersey. And they needed me to solve a retirement plan problem for them with some older employees, which I did. And to thank me, he took me to on their one-day Washington mission, which is a fabulous program. And we got to see things. Whenever you go on a trip with a group, a Jewish group, you get in to see things and meet people that you would never get to do by yourself, which is why missions to Israel are so wonderful. And so I gave a pledge. And he acted very surprised, so I didn't expect that. Okay. But I gave a pledge. And to thank me, he introduced me to the Business and Professional Women's Division, which doesn't really function the way it did then. But that was a phenomenal entree. And my BFF, you've met Susan Feldman, who was with me in the hospital and Alan passed away. It came from that. From there, and we are still the dearest of friends today. And I asked, well, isn't there a national group? There's, who governs us around the country? And so to thank me, I ended up on the national board for 14 years.
Yeah, no good deed goes unpunished.
Which was a wonderful, wonderful experience.
I bet it was.
Wonderful experience, meeting women from all over the world and working with women from all over the country who had shared the same commitment.
Right, and the same values.
Same values and same concerns. I developed a couple of training programs for them. I developed a leadership training program, some of which they still use today, and I use it today as well. And we ran seminars up and down the Eastern Coast. I developed some financial oriented training. I did a seminar on how to read financial statements, how to do budgets, how to understand Robert's Rules of Order. All of these things that you can do and help in the training process. I don't know if they're doing that now, but it was very important to me at that time. But I could travel anywhere in the world now and know people and say, hi, I'm coming over to Israel, Ruth. Can I come say hello? So it's a wonderful thing, wonderful thing. I've been to Israel, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 times since all of that began. Of course, I would love to go. I had planned a trip. Al and I always wanted to take the kids. And so I had planned a trip for last June.
Oh.
And we had the air flights all scheduled and an outline of what we were going to go and do, because I had promised Maddie that I would take him and Ben and we would do bar mitzvah there. And of course, the whole thing.
Yeah, when it all fell apart.
I said, now's the time I can go. If Alan will be with us, he'll just watch over us and we'll go. And everybody was excited. So Maddie said to me, whenever we got together and asked, Pop, Elise, are we still going to Israel?
Are you?
And someday, as soon as all this, gets cleared up and we can travel again.
This Michigas. Stella had the same thing. She was supposed to teach in Talma for another month, like she did 2 years ago. And last year she was supposed to go. But that fell apart because she was supposed to go in July or the end of July or June. And this year she was accepted again, which is of course no surprise. And she's committing to go if she gets the vaccinations, so, we're kind of in between trips to Israel. I'm not going with her. She goes on her own to do teaching. And these are the kinds of programs, it's interesting, Lise, because those are the kind of programs that we have no idea where they come from. They just kind of appear. And what kind of programs did you create? Either in the country or elsewhere in the world? What kind of Jewish programs were you the genesis of?
Well, a couple of them come to mind. One was one of the missions that I took. I was on the national board, so I was a leader, and we went to Belarus, Lithuania, and then ended up in Israel. And in Belarus, we were in a community center, and a couple of the parents, mothers, came up to talk to me that they had children. At that time, I thought it was little children who were affected by the drugs that came out as a result of Chernobyl. And was there anything that we in America could do to help them? So you know me, I solve problems. So I came back to Federation, and the board voted yes, and they quickly allotted money for it to bring them over and pay for the airfare. And the medical community all analyzed what the situation was and assigned different doctors to do various things. And we brought the two mothers and the two boys over, and I'm still in touch with them to this day. And one had a Crohn's disease and one had a hearing loss. But it was just a fabulous experience. And we took them through the community, and they went and met with synagogue youth, they did presentations all throughout the community. And it was really a firsthand opportunity. Thank goodness they spoke English well. Firsthand opportunity for the Jews in Monmouth County to see what life was really like abroad. And something so familiar. So one day I was making a chocolate cake, and you know, the mixer, and it's spinning. And I said, I don't remember, it was Max or Sasha, and I handed him a blade and said, "Do you want to lick it?" So that's just what my mother would do.
Yeah.
Lick the chocolate off. Don't waste anything.
Of course. I mean, yeah.
It's so that and that was a memorable thing, because that was probably close to 20 years ago. And
Sure.
I recently got an email from Max. He's married and has two children, and
Where are they living now?
In Moscow.
Oh, they're in Moscow. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, they went back, but they have stayed in touch. And then, of course, more recently, you're familiar with the dance program.
I am
So,
indeed.
yeah. So when I went on the board of the Axelrod Performing Arts Center, Jess Levy said to me, "Everybody on the board needs to have a committee position." Of course, I took him seriously, like I'm doing. And I said, "Well, how would you like to have a dance program here?" And and they said yes. And little did they realize what it would end up morphing into. And so I started it with my teacher in Florida, came up. And then the following December, Gabriel Chachnik went to swim at the Axelrod, at the, in the pool there. And his coach said, "Did you know we had a theater here?" And he said no. So he got introduced to Jess, who immediately called me and said, "You can't go to Florida until you meet Gabriel." So that, believe it or not, is only 3 years ago. But
Yeah.
Gabriel and I, and Gabriel's husband Joey and I, are very, very close, like we're brother and sister. And he comes from Argentina with a Jewish background. His uncle survived in a hole in the ground in the Ukraine. His uncle wrote wrote notes, and his niece translated it. I have it. One side is Spanish, the other side is Yiddish. So I don't get a lot of, I can read it, but obviously not understanding it all.
Right, right.
He developed a ballet called God, G-D, which is the story of his uncle. We have performed it once, and we want to bring it back again. In New Jersey, Holocaust education is required in the school system. So we will be performing it again. We just haven't done. In this time of COVID, it's difficult to figure out.
Right. I mean, there's a lot that we can't do. There's a lot that we want to do. It's like all of the plans get put on hold, and then we just have to come up with more creative things. Hence these interviews with congregants in Florida and elsewhere. What do you ascribe your commitment to the Jewish community to? Where does that drive come from?
Oh, I think it comes from my parents. And I think this is what was so important for parents today to be able to share their values with their children so that the children understand it and understand why. And I heard all the family stories. And I wonder sometimes with the grandkids, because I know more about the Schnur family than they do. So we spend holidays talking about where do they come from and why they did what they did. But I heard all the stories. I love listening to Alan's father talk about past years. And of course, I knew all about my father growing up in the Bronx and my mother growing up in Brooklyn, and they had extended families. So I think it's very important to hear that family history and to decide early on where you want to help, where you want to be of influence to the extent you can. Not everybody can do it with dollars. Some people have time or knowledge, whatever it is, that I think everybody owes it to themselves, and they owe it to the sustenance of the future Jewish communities. We lost so many in the Holocaust, and then we're doing ourselves a disservice now if we don't maintain Jewish values and Jewish teachings. So
it's something that Jewish educators have on their mind really every moment of every day. But I like what you said. It doesn't matter what you give, because not everybody can do dollars. But the the wonderful thing that I heard you saying is that everybody can do something, and when we pass it on to our children and grandchildren, they are the inheritors of this unbelievable tradition, and also an unbelievable tradition of helping, and Kol Yisrael or Evin Zelazeh, every Jew is responsible for another. And I think in some measure we've lost that in America. To, to in later generations, we have people who aren't necessarily as involved because they're involved in many other things, or there's a variety of reasons. But to hear your energy, and if this is your energy at 28 years old,
you can imagine.
right? I can imagine what your energy was like when you were 15.
Well, not necessarily 15. I think I came into my own probably it's starting in the late 20s and 30s. I growing up in Middlesex with parents who were quite bright, not college educated. I was the first to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
But the encouragement was phenomenal. Being involved on the level of Jewish Federation, and which is really a fundraising organization, so that we can take the what we raise and allocate it among agencies, synagogues for programming. I find that the younger generations now have a user mentality.
Consumer.
Yeah, and I have an expectation you should do for me, and it's not okay. I need this, but what can I do for you? And I don't know how to fix that.
Yeah. Well, if you ever figure it out, market it and you'll make a fortune.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
but you're right. You have been involved at Beth Miriam for, I don't even know how long. Elise, how long has it been? Honestly, I don't know.
It went back to, I don't know if you'll want to publish this part of the story, but it went back to when Alan and I got married. I said to him, I'm fine whatever synagogue I read Hebrew. I understand the prayers. It doesn't matter to me what synagogue you want to belong to. Just pick the one that you'll be most comfortable at.
Right. So just keep in mind, whatever you say, we're recording. So
yeah, okay. That's all right. I'll say it to the public. So we joined Beth Torah. Mm-hmm. And he knew a lot of people there. And the rabbi eventually retired. And there were a couple of young rabbis who came on board. The synagogue was having trouble sustaining itself, conservative synagogue, as was Bethel. And they decided to merge.
I remember.
And they decided that they would not keep either rabbi and would get a new rabbi. And Alan and I went to the synagogue. You don't know the story? We went to synagogue for the high holidays. We're sitting all the way in the back. We can't even see who's on the bima. And Alan said, I'm not following this any longer. It's just, I'm just not enjoying this.
Mm.
So I was president of Federation when I met you. I was, the kids, your kids, had raised money for one of our projects. And so I came over to give them an award one Friday night. And
Don't remember that.
yes, yeah, I sat with Andy Krantz and I saw the prayer book for the first time. I said, this is phenomenal. For those people who don't really understand what's going on, to have a Siddur that takes them through the process and they can read it in English and even if they know the Hebrew, the word in the Hebrew, it was very difficult. And I saw how you were with the kids. And I came home and I told Alan, because he always wanted to do something with the kids. And I said to him, we have to make a decision because Yontif is coming up and we would need to buy tickets for the Holy Days. So before I do that, why don't you come with me to Beth Miriam? And we did. But that night you didn't start services at 6:30 as we had been told. So we
6:30.
missed. So we said during the summer, services were at 6:30.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. All right.
But they weren't that night. So I said, what do you want to do? He said, you like it, just do it. And so, from the time he came, how enthralled he was to see the kids participating in service and doing Haftorah and reading from the Torah and blowing the shofar. He just fell in it. He just loved every part of it. And so it was definitely not a mistake for us to come over to Beth Miriam.
Oh, that's great. That's a great story. That's a great story. It's interesting. I was telling somebody in one of the other interviews, families come and go. Sometimes they have their bar mitzvah, they're out of religious school, and the family goes. But we started a program called Yalla, which is the Young Adult Learners. It's after my teen academy, and something funny happened on the way to the forum, which was a great movie, of course. But when we started advertising it, we had kids making connections with the temple whose family had left the temple. Isn't that interesting? And they are, in fact, tomorrow night we're having our first Yalla Shabbat online. We have Torah study once a month. And the kids they're not kids. I don't want to call them kids.
They're adults now, young adults.
They are adults because these are post-high school. These are also, in some cases, post-college. I mean, we have one of the kids is in medical school. So, we've got a connection that we've created with the kids and that these young adults have created back with us. And
Wonderful.
We're looking at this and we're saying, this is the kind of thing that you're talking about. And I can sense your enthusiasm because when you see the results of it, you can't help but dance. And anybody who has seen me dance runs the other way. but it's a great feeling, and I bet you have had such nachas and such kvelling in your years as a Jewish leader. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? The kvelling or the ups, the downs?
I want to talk about Jewish leadership for a moment. Because that's another thing that I find a little bit lacking. People willing to take on responsibility, and you have to put your heart and soul into the position, and not everybody wants to do it. But I think that this is one of the most rewarding things that you can do for yourself. And I feel there's certain things that leaders should do, certain places leaders should show up, whether it's to pay a shiva call or to go to a meeting you otherwise would rather not, but you need to have a presence if you're on their board. And that gives you an opportunity to see what's going on out there, to pull those blinders away and really understand what we need and how it's needed, and to as I said, to give of yourself, even if it isn't money that you're giving. Money's easy.
Yeah.
Money's easy. You write a check, gay goes into hate, do what you want to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
But to be there and to take a role and form a position and or be on the synagogue board is really a responsibility.
And it's
More
also,
of it.
yeah, and it's also an emotional commitment, because
Absolutely.
you're putting your heart into it, you're putting your soul into it, and that, a lot of people have such great skills, um, but we don't know about them because they're not in those leadership positions.
But some people don't have the skills, and that makes them nervous, and that's why they don't want to take a position. And it's no, I think it, I don't, I liken it to planning a trip and planning your roadmap. You wouldn't get in the car and start driving to California without figuring out what highways you were going to take, what stops you were going to make, where the gas stations were.
You clearly didn't travel with Stella and me to Iceland,
Well,
because that was exactly what we did.
yeah, but you were going on an adventure. I think
Yeah.
that's, that's a little different than you need to be in Long Island. You need to be at the airport for a flight at a certain time, and you don't know how to get there.
You better plan it.
Yeah, you better plan it. So that's why I developed some of the training programs where we did how to be a committee leader, how to form a committee, how to work in a team, how to control a meeting, how to develop an agenda. These are things that if you know how to do, you can get involved in doing them. But to ask somebody to sit on the board, their first answer is, what do I have to do? What kind of commitment do I have to make? And then it's downplayed, because they're going to say, no, not much time. Every other month we'll have a meeting, just show up. Well, that's doing the position a disservice. And it's whatever board you're going on, I think an orientation is important, to understand what somebody's skills are and have a blend of skills, and share with the board certain trainings so that they feel comfortable doing what they're about to do. It'll just make lives a whole lot easier.
Right. Training leaders for a board, but especially training Jewish leaders for Jewish boards and for Jewish activities, adds a certain other level of challenge. What else would you like to share with me and with the people who are watching in the last couple of minutes we have?
Oh, I have no particular words of wisdom to share, but I think to decide where you can be of help, what time commitment you're willing to do, and then offer it and show up.
Good. Yeah, show up. Show up, right? Who said that? What, 90% of winning is showing up, or something? Who said something like that? Uh, showing up is really important, but we have to do more than show up. I think that your life and your example is more than just simply showing up, right? And I want to thank you for showing up so much, and being part of the greater Jewish community, the Beth Miriam Jewish community, um, and really allowing me to serve as your rabbi, because that's been really a great honor.
Well, it's been wonderful to have you as my rabbi, and to spend the time to get to know me and my sister.
Yeah, and your sister.
We're very
And Alan.
grateful, we're delighted.
Yeah, yeah. Elise, I want to thank you. This was really good. This was part Jewish inspiration and part board training, Jewish guilt, and Kanedlach all rolled into one. But really, it was really great. I just going to share one thing. I never know where these interviews are going to go. I put on the rabbi's Facebook page, because this has been so successful. I said, "Here's what I'm doing, everybody. Um, uh, run with it." And I gave a link to all of the videos. And then one of my colleagues wrote back and said, "Well, what is your set of questions?" And I never thought of it because I don't have a set of questions. Because when people express what's going on Jewishly in their own hearts and their lives, there are no questions. You have to listen to them and then respond to them. And I just thought that it was a really interesting question on their part. But it reminds me of something that you just said. Sometimes we have an image of the way something ought to be, and uh, we need to ask the right questions to get there. But I would also say, as a rabbi, sometimes the best thing to do is simply to let somebody tell their story, because the vistas of adventure and the people you've met, it's remarkable. It's remarkable.
Well, thank you very much.
Oh,
Uh,
thank
I hope
you.
that, yeah, and I didn't talk about the Jewish community in Argentina and the synagogue there. Wherever we travel around the world, um, I've always managed to go and visit the synagogue that was there.
I
And
have a feeling that you have standing Shabbat invites in 12 time zones. Am I wrong?
well, I don't know about 12, but I was in London and we went to synagogue and we got invited to a bar mitzvah lunch. It was some, because, and it was gorgeous. All the women were dressed in these beautiful suits with matching hats, the same wool, whatever pattern they were in. And wherever you go in the world, you partake of a service, you make friends.
Yes, it's true.
You make friends. The Hebrew may be pronounced a little differently, with a little different. If you haven't heard Yiddish spoken with a Scottish accent, you haven't
Yeah, no, no.
lived.
Hey, listen, I was in Mississippi, and until you've heard Hebrew spoken with a Southern accent, boy, I'll tell you this. But you know what? Wherever you go, there's always someone Jewish, and there's always somebody as a part of your family wherever you go. That's beautiful. Elise,
I, I hope everybody enjoys all of these interviews and thank you for taking the time to do this. I think
oh
it's
no, no, thank you. I know that you took a time out of a very busy schedule, but I'm just going to stop the recording here for 1 second. Don't go away, okay?